We shall crush those enemies as we have done in the past. Yeah. You preach your nonsense, we shall answer you by what? When you say this, but politics is about kutumia Mukamwa. No, if you say we shall crush.
Museveni, Africa's most notorious dictator. Yoweri Museveni, the long-serving president of Uganda, has garnered a contentious reputation as one of Africa's most notorious leaders. Ascending to power in 1986 after a protracted guerrilla war, Museveni was initially welcomed as a champion of democracy and reform. Over the decades, however, his regime has devolved into an entrenched dictatorship characterized by human rights abuses, suppression of dissent, and corruption. The rise of Museveni. Museveni came to power promising a new era for Uganda, one marked by peace and stability following years of turmoil under previous regimes. His early policies, including infrastructure development and economic liberalization, garnered significant international support. Museveni's government was seen by many as a stabilizing force in the region, particularly in the midst of civil strife and conflict in neighboring countries. However, as time progressed, the mask of reform started to slip away. Promises of democratic governance gave way to authoritarian tactics, with Museveni extending his rule far beyond the traditional limits set by Ugandan law. Constitutional amendments in 2005 and 2017 allowed him to run for president indefinitely, effectively silencing the voices of political opposition. Human rights abuses. Under Museveni's rule, human rights organizations have documented numerous violations. The suppression of free speech has become commonplace, with journalists, activists, and opposition members often subjected to harassment, imprisonment, or violence. The most notable incident occurred during the controversial 2021 elections, where widespread reports of electoral fraud, intimidation, and brutality overshadowed the campaign. Opposition leader Bobi Wine found himself detained and subjected to inhumane treatment, shedding light on the increasingly repressive environment in the country. Museveni's government has also been accused of engaging in extrajudicial killings and torture, targeting those who dare to speak out against the regime. Such actions have led to Uganda being labeled as a country where political dissent is met with ruthless force, raising serious concerns among international watchdogs. Economic struggles and corruption. Despite initial economic growth, Uganda has been plagued by corruption, with Museveni's administration often implicated in unethical dealings. High-profile scandals involving government officials and misuse of public funds have become routine, undermining the country's economic stability and eroding public trust in governance. Education and healthcare, once central to Museveni's agenda, now suffer due to budget misappropriations, leaving many Ugandans without adequate services. Moreover, the economic benefits touted by the government have not been equitably distributed, resulting in widespread poverty and increased inequality. Youth unemployment and limited opportunities for marginalized communities have led to discontent, further fueling unrest against Museveni's regime. As Museveni continues to clutch onto power, the prospects for meaningful change remain dim. The growing dissent among the Ugandan populace reflects a yearning for reform and genuine democracy. International attention and pressure are crucial for fostering accountability and promoting human rights in Uganda. As the struggle for freedom and justice unfolds, many are left wondering whether the era of Museveni will finally come to an end, paving the way for a new chapter in Uganda's history.
I hear some people saying that I am their servant. I'm not a servant of anybody. I am a freedom fighter. That's what I do. I don't do it because that I'm your servant. I'm not your servant. I am just a freedom fighter. I'm fighting for myself, for my beliefs. That's how I come in. I'm not an employee. If anybody thinks he gave me a job, he's deceiving himself. I am just a freedom fighter whom you thought could help you also.
For nearly 4 decades, Uganda has been under the iron-fisted rule of President Yoweri Museveni, a leader who initially came to power with promises of reform and development but has since been accused of facilitating a regime marked by human rights abuses and crimes against humanity. His tenure stands as an alarming reminder of how power can corrupt and lead to the suffering of millions. Museveni ascended to power in 1986 after leading a successful rebellion against the military dictatorship of Milton Obote. In the early years of his presidency, he was lauded for bringing stability to a country that had been battered by civil war and despotism. However, that initial optimism has vanished as reports of severe human rights violations have emerged, casting a long shadow over his administration. One of the most egregious aspects of Museveni's legacy is the government's approach to dissent. Over the years, Museveni has intensified a brutal crackdown on political opposition, employing tactics reminiscent of the very regimes he once fought against. Opposition leaders, such as Kizza Besigye and Bobi Wine, have faced harassment, unlawful arrests, and torture. The 2021 general elections were rife with violence, with reports indicating that security forces were responsible for multiple killings. The chilling specter of state-sanctioned violence looms large, threatening any ideas of democratic governance or political plurality in Uganda. Moreover, human rights organizations have brought attention to Museveni's use of military and police forces to suppress protests and stifle freedom of expression. Citizens live in fear of reprisals for speaking out against the government, leading many to self-censor and disengage from political processes. This atmosphere of fear hinders both the development of democratic institutions and the vibrant civil society needed for a healthy democracy. The humanitarian crisis extends beyond the political realm. Allegations of extrajudicial killings, torture, and arbitrary detentions have been reported extensively. International organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have documented these abuses, highlighting how Museveni's government has consistently violated international human rights laws. Women and children, in particular, have suffered from the consequences of the regime's policies, including the use of sexual violence as a tool of repression. The repercussions of Museveni's authoritarian rule are felt not only in Uganda but also throughout the East African region. His government has frequently intervened militarily in neighboring countries, citing issues of regional security. However, this often leads to further destabilization rather than resolution. These interventions have been critiqued as a means of expanding Uganda's influence rather than fostering genuine peace and stability.
Oh, Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United, free for liberty, together we'll always stand.
Despite the overwhelming evidence of atrocities committed under his watch, President Museveni continues to enjoy the support of various international actors, often justified by Uganda's strategic geopolitical position and contributions to regional security efforts. This complex relationship raises urgent ethical questions about accountability and the global response to human rights violations. Yoweri Museveni, the long-standing president of Uganda, has been a controversial figure on the African political landscape since he assumed power in 1986. While he is often praised for his role in stabilizing Uganda after years of turmoil, his military interventions and alleged war crimes in neighboring countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, Somalia, Sudan, and the Central African Republic paint a much darker picture of his legacy. Museveni's military actions in the DRC during the First and Second Congo Wars have been particularly scrutinized. Reports indicate that Ugandan troops were involved in widespread atrocities, with accusations ranging from illegal resource extraction to direct participation in mass killings and sexual violence. The International Court of Justice ruled in 2005 that Uganda had violated international law by illegally invading the DRC and supporting rebel groups, which resulted in a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. The rumble of gunfire and the cries of the innocent became a grim backdrop against which Museveni's ambitions were pursued. In Somalia, Museveni's role as a key player in the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, has received mixed reviews. While he has been commended for contributing troops to fight the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, there are troubling reports of human rights abuses by Ugandan forces. Civilians have alleged mistreatment, including unlawful killings and harassment, as peacekeeping operations turned into missions fraught with violence and insecurity. These actions not only tarnish the military's reputation but also diminish the credibility of international peacekeeping initiatives. The conflict in Sudan, particularly in the Darfur region, provides another stark example of Museveni's alleged transgressions. Uganda's support for various rebel groups has led to accusations of complicity in the ongoing violence and human rights violations. The complex interplay of regional politics has often left ordinary citizens caught in a cycle of suffering, with Museveni's military maneuvers often exacerbating the situation rather than alleviating it. In the Central African Republic, Museveni's involvement is similarly marred with allegations of war crimes. Reports have suggested that Ugandan troops, under the banner of pursuing the Lord's Resistance Army (LRA), have engaged in violent encounters with both rebel factions and civilians. The impact on local populations has been devastating, as communities have faced relentless violence that fuels further instability and hardship. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has recently made headlines by directing Uganda, under President Yoweri Museveni, to pay the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations for its unlawful actions during the conflict in the late 1990s. This ruling not only underscores the consequences of foreign invasion and resource exploitation but also highlights the importance of international law in addressing historical injustices. The conflict, often referred to as the First Congo War, began in 1996 and saw Uganda's military intervening in the DRC under the pretext of supporting rebel groups. However, reports indicated that the Ugandan forces engaged in extensive resource extraction, pillaging wealth in the form of gold, diamonds, and timber. The ICJ found that these actions constituted illegal exploitation, contributing to significant harm to the DRC's economy and society. In its ruling, the ICJ called for Uganda to compensate the DRC for the damages incurred during its military operations. The court estimated the damages at around $325 million, a figure that reflects the breadth of the resources looted and the long-lasting effects of the invasion on the Congolese people. The ruling represents a significant moment in international relations, signaling that countries cannot act with impunity, especially when it comes to human rights and the sovereignty of nations. For Uganda, this ruling is a reminder of the responsibilities that come with military engagement abroad. The Museveni administration has faced criticism for its foreign interventions, and the ICJ's decision could have implications for Uganda's foreign policy moving forward. The president's government now faces the challenge of addressing the financial ramifications of this ruling, which could strain an already fragile economy. The question remains whether Museveni will ever be held accountable for these actions. The international community's response has been largely muted, allowing him to operate with a degree of impunity. Local populations living in the shadows of his military campaigns continue to suffer immensely from both direct violence and the broader humanitarian impact of conflict. For Ugandans and the citizens of these affected nations, the legacy of Museveni's leadership is a complex tapestry woven with threads of both stabilization and systematic brutality. As calls for accountability grow, it is clear that the consequences of his regime's actions extend far beyond borders, affecting the lives of millions who yearn for peace and justice. Without a concerted effort to address these past transgressions, the cycle of violence and impunity may tragically persist, further entrenching the suffering of those caught in the crossfire of political ambitions.
Now, if you hear a Muganda talking Baganda, you know he's an enemy of Baganda, number one. And secondly, an enemy of Uganda and an enemy of Africa. And we shall crush those enemies, as we have done in the past. Yeah. You preach your nonsense, we shall answer you by word. And if you go beyond word, you want something else, you will also get it. This is not the first time.